Welcome to the English Epics channel. We got married relatively late. I was 29 and she was 32. That was 6 years ago. We had both lived full lives before meeting each other, so we were practically broke. Our premarital discussions included our shared desire to have children and our agreement that Julie would stay home as a mom until the youngest child started school. We both believed that having a stay-at-home parent was crucial for a child's well-being, provided we could afford it. This meant that until we had children, we needed to save enough money to weather the lean years. It also meant that Julie worked full-time, and I did the same, taking on as much overtime as I could handle. I got used to working double shifts on Fridays, going in late on Saturdays, and putting in another 12-hour day. It paid off. Now the house was fully ours and the bank account steadily grew. Recent discussions had led me to believe that having kids would soon be part of our plans. Of course, this had to happen before Julie turned 40 to avoid a decrease in the chances of conceiving our first child. That's why our conversation on Thursday night felt so bizarre. "Dave, I want to talk about a trial separation. How do you spell disbelief?" I was so shocked that my mind went blank. All I could manage to say was, "What?" Those of you who've ever been dumped by a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, or wife know the feeling. The person doing the dumping has thought it through, planned everything, and is fully prepared. The one being dumped is caught off guard and confused. That was me, right at that moment. My next response was just as intellectually profound. Why? I just think we need a little break from each other. You have to admit, Dave, you're not as romantic as you used to be, and you don't seem to appreciate me like you once did. You always say you're too tired to go out more than once a month. You don't make love to me 4 times a week like before. And, honestly, you've been putting on a bit of weight. Surely you'll agree that a short break will do us some good. How about a month, Dave? Then we'll see how things are going. I'll stay with Frida. Feel free to call me whenever you want. But I don't think we should see each other more than once a week. Any more than that, and it wouldn't really be a separation, would it? Just know, Dave, that I love you very much, and I know we'll have beautiful children together. I'm sure that in a month, 2 at most, we'll be back to where we were before. With those words, Julie stood up, grabbed 2 suitcases, and headed for the door. I don't get a say in this at all, do I, Julie? I stammered. I've made my decision, Dave. Please sit down, Julie. Reluctantly, she came back. Who is he, Julie? Oh God, I knew you'd think that. I just told you that I love you, Dave, only you. There's no one else. So there's no need to tap my phones, follow me, install a GPS tracker in my car, or hire a private detective. In fact, if you do any of that, I might interpret it as a lack of trust in me and a reason to reevaluate our relationship. She tried to stand again, but I grabbed her hand and pulled her back down. This isn't fair, Julie. You've had days, maybe weeks, to plan your little speech and your little gamble. But all of this is brand new to me. What gamble, Dave? I was glad to finally see the confusion on her face that mirrored what I was feeling. You must realize, Julie, that you've just put our relationship at risk with your unilateral stunt. It reeks of contempt. I've always treated you as an equal partner in our relationship and would never dream of doing something so reckless without consulting you first. What risk, Dave? I love you, you love me. What's the problem here? It's just for a month or so. If I miss you sooner, I'll come back in a flash. What do you mean by contempt? I mean that you didn't give me a chance to defend myself. For instance, we hardly go out together because I work overtime on Fridays and Saturdays. We agreed on overtime to improve our financial situation. We're not as intimate as we used to be, partly because we've been married for 6 years, and partly because I'm always so stressed. I've gained weight because you suggested I take the supervisor position for the extra money, and it's not a hands-on job. That's something I've been thinking about lately, so please could you stay so we can talk this through? Sorry, Dave, I promised Frida I'd go out with her tonight. With that, she stood up, grabbed her bags, and headed to the door. All I could say was, just remember you're married, Julie. After only a brief pause, she headed toward the door. The next day, I returned to work at 10 a.m. with sandwiches made from week-old bread. That evening, I stopped by the 24-hour corner store to pick up some supplies. When I got home after 11:30 p.m., the message light on the phone was blinking. It was Julie saying she missed me and thanking me for giving her some space by not calling. I was starting to get annoyed that I was working myself to the bone to put 3 times more money in the bank than she was while she enjoyed a social life. Funny enough, I'd never resented it before. Neither of us called the other on Sunday. On Monday, I went to my boss and said I was sorry, but I wouldn't be able to work overtime for a while. When I hadn't reached out to Julie by Wednesday, she called me that I felt a little guilty for being cold toward her. So on Thursday after dinner, I went to Frida's house. As a peace offering, I brought a bouquet of flowers and a box of chocolates. Frida was Julie's best friend. She had been divorced for just over a year and never knew the exact reason, but I suspected it might have been because she had cheated on her husband. She explained that Julie was in the shower. I waited on the couch while Frida sat next to me. She moved much closer than I was comfortable with. I subtly shifted away, but she followed. Thank God Julie came downstairs at that moment. I handed her the flowers and chocolates. Our conversation felt somewhat strained, nothing like the usual light-hearted exchanges. After some small talk, she asked, "Did you want something, Dave?" I must admit I was a little taken aback by that. "No, I just came by to invite my wife on a date tomorrow night." "Sorry, Friday and I already have plans." "Wait a second. Tomorrow's Friday. Don't you work Friday nights?" "No, I quit." "What about the money?" "Well, I decided to prioritize my family and physical health when I got your message at 11:30 last Saturday night. The one where you said you were going somewhere." I realized I was acting like a complete idiot, working myself to death. Last Friday I was so exhausted I nearly collapsed at work. Julie looked stunned. She stepped forward and hugged me. "Don't be upset, darling. In a few months I'm going to need your strength." At that moment, Frida returned and ruined the mood for everyone. "Sorry, Dave, but the girls will be here soon for the Tupperware party. Some things are just not meant for a man to witness." Julie walked me to the door. I had to say it. "Please come home, Julie. I miss you. 3 more weeks, Dave, and then we'll talk." I noticed how uncomfortable she looked as she said it, like she hated saying no. However, any warm feelings I had were wiped out when she added, "Why don't you take a month off from overtime to recharge? We'll need that money, Dave." I just glanced at the flowers and chocolates, still sitting where she had carelessly tossed them, and left Dudham. My weekly visit was the following Tuesday evening. Once again, Julie was in the shower. I didn't make the same mistake as last time and avoided sitting on the couch. Frida was dressed and stood uncomfortably close while speaking to me. It really made me feel uneasy. Julie came downstairs also dressed. She looked a little embarrassed as she explained that I really should have called. If I had, I would have known they were about to leave. I felt more than humiliated as I was shown the door. I could have sworn I heard giggling from the other side after it closed, and I swore it would be the last time I let myself be humiliated like that. By the end of the week, neither of us had called the other. That Sunday, I was working out in the backyard. I had put together some makeshift weightlifting equipment and was already feeling like I was regaining my former strength. Suddenly, I felt a pair of arms wrap around me from behind and someone's body press against my sweaty back. I was caught off guard, but for a brief moment, enjoyed my first human contact in 2 weeks. Then I froze as Frida's voice whispered right in my ear. "Sorry, handsome, I just couldn't resist." Shocked, I turned around, breaking free at the same time. More to hide my embarrassment than to be friendly, I asked if she'd like a coffee. I noticed Frida was wearing one of her usual provocative outfits. I have to admit, though, it did show off an impressive neckline. Once inside, I perched on the edge of the kitchen table, hoping to create some distance. It didn't work. Frida pulled a chair closer, so close that our legs touched. We made small talk, something I've never been particularly good at. "Aren't you going to ask how Daskin's doing?" "No." She made it clear that it's none of my business. Frida smiled. "You know, she's a little upset. She was hoping you'd already be begging and groveling." "Sorry, Frida, but that's not my style. I invited her on a date the first time I came to your place. She turned me down, saying she already had plans. I noticed she never called or tried to reschedule. I have no idea what this separation is supposed to be, so I'm just going to wait, either for her to come back or for our marriage to end." I assumed everything I said would make its way back to Julie. I expected Frida to be alarmed by my last statement, but instead she just smiled and placed her hand on my leg. This had to be some kind of test. I figured it would pass, as I didn't find Frida emotionally appealing. Her body, however, was another matter entirely. I couldn't help but notice that another button on her top had somehow magically come undone. "You know, I've always admired you and Julie as a couple, right? You must be really confident in your love to let her go on dates with other guys. Or are you just pretending not to care?" My blood ran cold. We had never discussed dating during this one-sided separation, but my statement, "Don't forget you're married," should have been crystal clear. Without saying a word, I left the house and got into my car. When I reached Frida's place, I stormed straight inside from the kitchen window. I could see Julie sunbathing on the terrace in a bikini. Determined, I marched toward the door. "Julie, what's this crap? Frida's telling me about your dates." "I haven't been dating, Dave. We met a couple of guys at the club last Tuesday and danced a bit. We might have mentioned we'd be there again and could see them, but that's hardly a date." I expected Julie to look worried, defending herself like that, but she didn't. If I had to choose one word to describe her expression, it would be determined. "And what about last night, dear?" "Nothing. Just more dancing. Nothing inappropriate. We didn't kiss or anything like that. They just bought us drinks and we danced a little." "Nothing inappropriate. Since when is it appropriate for a married woman to dance with other men when her husband isn't even around? I suppose at the end of the night you just casually mentioned when you'd be there next time. Well, if you meet them again, that would definitely count as a date, and it would just as definitely be very inappropriate. Look, Julie, this really hurts me. I still have no idea what this separation is even about. Maybe we can skip the next 2 weeks, and you can just come home now. I really miss you. No, Dave, not yet. Actually, I think we'll stick to the full month. My old feelings for you haven't come back yet. She looked strangely embarrassed again, as if she were saying something she didn't truly mean. Out of all her irrational actions lately, this confused me the most. I just stared at her for a moment longer before getting up to leave. You could invite me on another date, Maybe you'll have better luck this time. Without stopping or looking back, I replied, or you could invite me on a date. You know where I live. Starting Monday, Julie began calling home every evening. The conversations were always short and awkward. I got the impression she was just checking if I was at home. I didn't like it. On Friday evening, she called at 7 p.m. The call forwarding I had set up from the home phone to my mobile worked like a charm. I could clearly hear music in the background. I was nearly at Frida's house and confirmed that Julie's car was gone. 10 minutes away from Frida's, I spotted Julie's car in the parking lot of a bar. I peered through the bar window until I spotted Julie and Frida sitting alone in a booth. As I watched, 2 more women joined them. One I vaguely recognized as another of Julie's friends, Deborah, while the other was unfamiliar. I observed as Deborah introduced her to Julie and Frida. While they were distracted, I snuck into a corner and hid at the far end of the bar. Straining to hear, I managed to catch most of the conversation. It was Deborah speaking. You're crazy, Julie. From what you've said, Dave is way more romantic than my husband. Another voice chimed in, presumably belonging to the unfamiliar woman. Yeah, I think so too. I'd kill for half of what you say you're getting from your ex. Frida interjected. What do you think Julie deserves better? Look at her. She's gorgeous, Deborah responded. I don't know, but this sounds like a very risky game. How do you feel about him, Julie? Seems like with all that overtime he's working, the guy must be wasting most of his time. Do you keep him in bed all Sunday? Damn, if he were mine, that's what I'd do. Julie spoke quietly, so I couldn't hear a single word of her response, which went on for several minutes. All I caught was Deborah starting again when Julie finished, and, You're making this guy fight for you. At that moment, someone turned on the jukebox, and the bar quickly started to fill up. I wondered how long it would be before those guys showed up. Over the next hour, I watched as plenty of men approached the women, trying their luck. Every single one of them walked away disappointed. Then I noticed the unfamiliar woman heading toward the bar. As she approached my corner, I made room for her. She smiled at me and ordered 4 drinks up close. She turned out to be quite an attractive lady with short curly brown hair and a soft smile. While she waited for her drinks, she turned to me. Do you come here often? Hey, that's supposed to be my question. Well, you were too slow. We chatted casually until her drinks arrived. I didn't miss her quick glance at my ring finger. Because of my work, I rarely wear a ring. She surprised me when she said, Look, the conversation at my table is absolutely dreadful. Do you mind if I use you as an excuse to get away from them? What? How could I possibly mind when a beautiful woman is talking to me? What do you think? But I should warn you, I'm married, though my marriage is in serious trouble. That's why I'm here. Wow. Well, thanks for your honesty. I'm just looking for some company, so if that's okay, I'd love to chat. She gave me a mischievous smile and returned 2 minutes later. For the next hour and a half, we talked casually. I kept glancing around to make sure no one was watching us. I noticed that a man had joined the girls' table and was buying all the drinks. Sarah was delightful, and we were having a great time together. 30 Deborah approached. I didn't see her until it was too late to hide. A faint look of confusion settled on her face. I knew that look. She recognized me but couldn't place where from. I smiled as Sarah introduced us. Deborah whispered something to Sarah that I was almost certain was, You're right, he is cute. Julie offered to give us a ride home. Do you need a lift? I noticed hesitation on Sarah's face anyway. I really should get going. It was nice talking to you, Sarah. I kissed her on the cheek. She blushed and left. Halfway to the door, she turned back and handed me a business card. Without saying a word but flashing another smile, she walked away. I watched as all 3 women left, leaving Frida and the guy at the table. I decided to give them a 5-minute head start in the parking lot. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. Caller Idaho showed it was Julie calling from the forwarded home number. After a brief exchange of greetings, she asked why there was music playing in the background. Is there a party at the house? I'm at a bar, Julie. I've been spending the evening chatting with a beautiful woman. What the hell, Dave? Who said you could do that? Are you saying only you get to be free tonight? Are you saying I'm not free? Of course. As long as we're married, I expect you to act accordingly. Or weren't you calling me from a bar? Yes. And I suppose those guys from last time didn't show up, did they? No. Yes, maybe. Look, Dave, I told you I'm not dating. It was nice to see her flustered. Listen, Julie, why don't we cut this crap and go back to the way things were? Come home. I'll meet you there. There was a pause. No, sorry, Dave. I'm just not ready. Fine, then come over for the night. No, sorry, Dave. I'll call you later. I returned to thinking about everything I'd learned that evening. With no clear answers, I had the growing impression that things were spiraling out of control. This time, Frida showed up on Saturday afternoon. I asked her what the hell her friend was playing at, but she denied knowing anything. Not very convincingly, though. When she tried to kiss me this time, I was ready. I kept her at arm's length. What the hell are you playing at, Frida? For God's sake. I'm married to your best friend. For now, Dave. I just wanted to see if I had a chance after Julie leaves you. It sounded so contrived it was almost laughable. But it reinforced my initial suspicions. You mean if Julie leaves me for Frida? Of course, Dave. I really hope you'll manage. Telling her I felt extremely uncomfortable with the situation, I showed her to the door. Frida didn't want to leave. In the end, I had to be blunt and tell her just how inappropriate her behavior was. Are you and Julie going out again tonight? Yeah, probably. That was our final conversation. To hell with it. I called Sarah. She seemed happy to hear from me but said she couldn't meet tonight. She suggested Tuesday instead. I felt it was my duty to remind her. Listen, Sarah, we're just going to be friends. I'm still in the middle of a very complicated personal situation right now. I just really enjoyed your company last night. I promised to treat you with the utmost respect until everything is sorted out. Saying she had enjoyed our conversation and that her situation was also a bit complicated, she hung up, adding that she was looking forward to Tuesday. Monday morning marked the beginning of a new pattern in my relationship with Julie. She started calling me at 6 a.m. every weekday, around 6 p.m. when I usually got home from work, and again before bed. Supposedly it was because she missed me, but my pleas for her to come back were still rejected. It was painfully clear that I was being monitored. On Tuesday, Sarah met me at the door of her apartment, and we left right away. She looked stunning. Once we were seated at the restaurant, I started the conversation. So, would you like to tell me why your personal life is a bit complicated? Sure, her name's Hannah. It turned out Hannah was Sarah's 3-year-old daughter. Her father had decided family life was too much for him. Sarah's mother was watching her that evening. But wanting to steer the conversation away from questions about my own personal problems, I quickly changed the subject. When we were talking at the bar, you said the conversation at your table was absolutely dreadful. What did you mean by that? Oh, that. Awful conversations and silly people. There was a woman named Julie. She's temporarily separated from her husband. But the ridiculous part is, she's determined to go back to him. They were just about to start having kids, and she separated from him to try to make him fight for her, pamper her more, be more romantic, and stuff like that. The sad thing, though, was that when she described what he was already doing, it sounded like he was doing plenty. He brought her flowers every week, took her on dates every month, and seemed to spoil her all the time. Even though he works late every Saturday, he would get up early on Sundays to make her breakfast. Last year, he even took her on a surprise cruise. God, I would have been thrilled to get half of that from my ex. It upset my friend Deb, too. She doesn't get anything like that. Some women just don't realize how good they have it, I suppose. Trust me, it gets even sillier. Even before they separated, she was doing everything she could to make him jealous. Like what? Well, apparently she started coming home later and later from girls' nights out, deliberately wearing men's cologne. Hell, one time she even got a pair of panties from her friend. Frida had gotten from her lover, so you can imagine what they were like. She left them on the bedroom floor until the next day. Her husband didn't notice a thing. Sounds to me like her husband's pretty naive, or maybe he loved her so much he didn't see those things. When none of that worked, she and her friend came up with the idea of a trial. Separation. The plan was that he would spiral into despair and fight for her like crazy. But the guy did nothing. When he didn't react the way they expected, they decided to turn up the pressure. She stopped calling him. He ignored her. Then she had her friend plant the idea in his head that she was dating someone. After everything they've done, the poor guy just doesn't react. Honestly, I admire him. That's exactly what I would do if someone treated me that way. But what was really sad was when Deb asked how much effort she herself had put into the marriage. I think that's when Julie realized just how one-sided her relationship was. You'd think that would make her stop all this nonsense. But it didn't. Now they've really backed themselves into a corner. They're stuck and have no idea what to do. And all because a proud man refuses to play by their rules. Well, she could go back to him, lay everything out on the table, and get back to a normal life. Yeah, that's what I do, and I think that's what she really wants to do too. But I also think her friend is pulling the strings. Frida gave her some very cryptic looks on Friday. Maybe her friend is trying to drive a wedge between them to steal the husband for herself. You might be right. That would definitely align with what I've seen, though it would certainly make her a cold, spiteful witch. If you were the husband, what would you do? Well, I don't know how their relationship has been up to now, but my instinct would be to dump that silly, crazy woman and move on to someone who actually appreciates him. At that point, our food arrived, and we shifted to more neutral topics. I couldn't believe how comfortable I felt with Sarah. When the waitress cleared away the empty glasses, my conscience wouldn't let me continue the charade. Sarah, everything you've said makes me think you're a very decent person with very strong values. Well, thank you, kind sir. Do you think I'm a decent person? Without hesitation, Sarah replied, I pride myself on being a good judge of character, and I bet money that you're a very good man. Oh God. This wasn't going to be easy. I reached across the table and took her hands, probably in an attempt to stop her from bolting. Taking a deep breath, I dove right in. Please forgive me, Sarah, but I've been a bit dishonest. My excuse is that I'm really confused right now and would do just about anything to ease the turmoil I'm feeling. I want you to know that I genuinely respect you, which is why I need to tell you the whole truth. Let me introduce myself properly. My name is Dave, and I've been married to a woman named Julie for 6 years. 4 weeks ago, she announced, despite my objections, that she wanted a trial separation. Tonight, a new friend suggested I leave her. Because of the extreme disrespect she's shown me, plus the awful pain she's caused, I've already been thinking in the same direction. You were right. I treated her like a queen. But only now do I realize how little she gave back. I watched a cascade of emotions play across Sarah's face before settling on horror. She covered her mouth with a clenched fist. Oh God, did I really call your wife a stupid woman? Well, she is a stupid woman. Do you realize that the first thing you said wasn't about how I lied to you, but about how you might have offended me? That only proves what a wonderful person you are. Can you forgive me? Yes. You used me a bit, but I can see why. Is that why you talked to me on Friday night? Were you looking for a spy? Hey, you were chatting with me too, remember? Can I count on your friendship until this gets resolved one way or another? Of course, Dave. But friendship is all I can offer. I don't want to have anything to do with destroying your marriage. Thank you. Your friendship is all I need right now. From my perspective, we had a perfectly happy marriage with not the slightest hint that Julie was unhappy. Then, one Thursday, I came home from work, and she hit me with the idea of a trial separation. She was already packed to leave, but I managed to get her to give me some kind of explanation, though not enough to stop me from being completely confused. Since I put all my energy into work or Julie, I don't really have any close friends. Do you think there's a chance you could fix things? I don't know, Sarah. A big part of me feels like I'd be a complete pushover if I took her back after the way she treated me. Besides, after talking to you, I realized just how one-sided my marriage really was. It's a bit awkward to admit that to you. By mutual, unspoken agreement, we shifted to more neutral topics. We had a lovely evening, which ended when Sarah had to relieve her mother. I suggested she take her time to think everything over and reach out to me. I added that I'd understand if I never heard from her again. The next day, I was walking toward the grocery store when someone called out to me from a coffee shop further down the street. I turned and saw Julie, Frida, and another woman whose back was to me. As I approached the table, my heart sank when I recognized Deborah. She gave the game away by exclaiming "you" the moment she recognized me. The expected phone call came at 9:30 p.m. I was nearly asleep, and in that state, no one feels their best. Dave, didn't I warn you not to spy on me? The fact that you did shows a lack of trust in me. On top of that, it shows a complete lack of respect. Look at it from my perspective, Julie. You pull this stunt on me and refuse to explain what it all means. Wouldn't you think I might try to figure it out on my own? That was a clear violation of our rules, Dave. Your rules, Julie. Dave, sweetheart, I just don't know what to do about all this. This trial separation isn't working the way I thought it would. I'm not sure I love you as much as I need to. I think we need to extend it by another month or two and see how things go. She paused, clearly expecting me to explode. I stayed silent. Unless she'd changed her mind since last Friday, this was just an escalation to get me to try harder. What's that old saying? If at first you don't succeed, try, and try again. Personally, I preferred the mining variation. If at first you don't succeed, use more explosives next time. Simply extending the separation and reinforcing her lowered opinion of me seemed pretty unconvincing, I thought. Of course, this wasn't the end of it. All right, Dave. I didn't want to do this, but I think it's only fair. I think I should be allowed to date other guys. Maybe if I do that, I'll realize how good you are and get my old feelings back." She paused again, waiting for the inevitable outburst. This time my silence wasn't intentional. I was simply speechless. When I finally found my voice, I chose not to use it. I knew I couldn't control what I'd say, but I also knew it wasn't likely to solve anything. "Are you there, Dave?" I still didn't respond. For a moment, I considered telling her that I knew exactly what she was up to. If I laid all my cards on the table, she might come back, but the underlying issue would remain. "Dave? I think going on a date would be a very bad move, Julie. In fact, let me make this clear. If you actually date or behave in any way that is inappropriate for a married woman, I will consider it a declaration that you've abandoned our marriage. By inappropriate, I mean seeing a guy more than once, dancing, touching, or kissing another man. Am I being clear enough? I honestly don't know if we can save our marriage, even if you came back today, but I'm willing to try. Please, Julie, come back to where you belong." This time the silence was hers. "Well, I don't think you're in a position to dictate terms, Dave. I don't belong to you. I believe I'm free to find a little romance and companionship that I've missed over the past month." At that moment, I seriously started to think Julie had lost her mind. And should I point out that the reason she'd been missing romance was because she ran away from a romantic partner? "So, Julie, are you insisting on opening up this marriage? Listen, you've never given me a reason for this separation that I could understand. The closest theory I've come up with is that you're trying to make me work harder to put more effort into our marriage. I dismiss that as being too disrespectful. One of the benefits of you leaving is that I've had time to think. Now I realize that I seem to have put far more effort into our relationship than you ever did." Silence again. When she finally broke at this time, her voice was on the verge of tears, as if she were slavishly following a plan she had just realized was deeply flawed. "I'm sorry, Dave, but I've already made my decision." The dial tone signaled the end of the conversation, and I suspected it also marked the end of our marriage. Sarah called on Thursday evening. She told me that I was completely forgiven, and I felt more relief than I could describe. She asked if there was any news, assuring me that she was asking only as a friend. I shared my recent conversations with Julie, adding my analysis of her likely motives. "So, what are you going to do now, Dave? Just sit back and wait for her to wreck our marriage, I suppose. Do you want me to spy on her this weekend, Dave? No? Don't involve yourself in that, Sarah? How about finding out where they'll be and taking me on a date to the same place? No, I'm not going to stoop to her level. But that's a good idea. I'd love to see you this weekend." We spent a few minutes effortlessly negotiating and eventually settled on having a picnic on Sunday. She didn't press me about why I wasn't free on Friday or Saturday. She already knew. We must have talked for 2 hours. On Friday, it didn't take long to find Julie and Frida. The fact that they were sitting in the same old bar suggested one of two possibilities. Either Julie was truly confident that I was too scared to spy on her, or more likely she was counting on me to do so. This time I watched everything through the windows, feeling slightly ashamed of my actions. That evening Julie behaved well. It was just her, Frida, and Deborah left at the table. They simply chatted until 10 p.m. Frida accepted a few offers to dance, but the other two declined. Eventually, 2 persistent guys approached them, clearly targeting Julie and Frida. Shortly after, Deborah left, leaving the 4 of them at the table. The women occasionally glanced around the darker corners of the bar. I was pleasantly surprised when Frida and Julie left alone at 11:30. I followed their taxi to their house and stood outside, watching until the lights went out. Saturday was very different. It was the same bar again. This time the same 2 guys were already waiting. At 8:05 p.m. my marriage was over. After Frida left the table to dance with her chosen half of the dynamic duo, the other guy made his move. He scooted closer to Julie, and from my vantage point I saw him place his hand on her leg. In the 5 minutes I gave her to push it away, she must have scanned the bar at least 6 times. I walked into the bar. When she saw me approaching, she at least had the decency to push his hand away. The look on her face could only be described as smug as she delivered her opening gambit. "Dave, I warned you not to spy on me again." Her unfortunate companion, sensing my mood, stood up. Whether he planned to confront me or run, I'll never know. Ignoring all socially acceptable behavior, I stepped in close, emphasizing his diminutive size next to my 6'1" frame. In a low growl, I delivered the shortest phrase in the English language. "Leave." He ran without taking my eyes off Julie's face. I sat down in the now vacant seat and pulled a bundle of papers from my chest pocket. "These are papers for a mutually agreed divorce. I've already filled them out. All you need to do is sign them." I included a separate agreement for dividing our assets. I see no reason not to split everything 50-50. It makes sense for me to keep the house, since you've already moved out. I watched as her smug expression shifted to something much closer to horror. I didn't wait for the show to finish. I was desperate to leave before Julie saw the tears welling in my eyes. She didn't say a word as I walked away. Intrigued, I started watching through the window again. Julie was sobbing uncontrollably. 2 minutes later, Frida returned, looking confused. As soon as she glanced at the papers lying on the table, her face broke into a white smile. For the next hour, I watched as Frida did most of the talking. Within 15 minutes, Julie had stopped crying. An hour later, she looked completely relaxed. Somehow, Frida seemed to have convinced Julie that their scheme was still going according to plan. That night, I barely slept again. I knew the final confrontation was still ahead, more pain from a woman I just couldn't stop thinking about. I expected a visit from Frida the next day and pretended I wasn't home when she came by. I ignored several of her phone calls. From Julie, there was nothing that at 1:30 p.m. I knocked on Sarah's door. She glanced at the bouquet of red roses in my hand and hugged me tightly. I was going to ask how you've spent the last few days, but now I see. God, this woman was perceptive. She knew friends didn't give each other roses or that I'd bring them to her when everything was still halfway resolved. She invited me in, and we approached an older woman. Hugging me, Sarah introduced us to each other. Dave, this is my mom, Laura. Mom, this is my boyfriend, Dave. I was speechless, but this time in the best way. I also wondered how much Sarah had told her mother. Laura solved the mystery for me by asking, "So is it all over?" I filled them in on the latest events, adding my suspicion that Julie wasn't taking it seriously yet. More work would be needed to prove that I meant what I said. By breaking the rules, Julie had shown just how much she disrespected me. Both Sarah and Laura saw and heard my pain. Laura hugged me too. Then a little angel walked into the room. Hannah had finished her nap. I was introduced again. She looked disappointed when Sarah explained that she and I were going out, even after Laura reassured her about the fun they'd have together. "Can't you come with us?" I whispered to Sarah. "Are you sure I'm all in, Sarah?" "I accept the whole package. That would be wonderful. It breaks my heart to be away from her all week, so I love spending the weekends with her." Hannah beamed when she heard the news. We had a fantastic day by the river. Sarah jokingly complained that she felt a bit left out, but her wide smile told me I didn't need to take it seriously. I drove both ladies home, where Laura treated me to dinner. When I left, I gave Sarah another chaste kiss on the cheek. When I returned home, Julie must have been hiding in her usual spot further down the road. I hadn't even opened the front door when she pulled into the driveway. She left the engine running and stepped out, holding the papers I had given her on Saturday. "Here, Dave," signed and notarized. "Good night." I was stunned as she walked back to her car. She climbed in, buckled up, and reversed out of the driveway. Rolling down the window, she called out to me, "Now that I've called your little bluff, maybe you'll ask me out this week? I'm free on Wednesday." With those words, she walked away. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. I'm from Earth, and Julie seems to be from somewhere in the Horsehead Nebula. If everything had ended in screams, it would have been some terrifying scream. The shouting began on Monday evening. Frida was waiting for me in the driveway when I returned from work. Before I could react, she grabbed me and kissed me on the lips as I got out of the car. I shoved her away roughly, shouting, "Listen once and for all. I'm not the slightest bit interested in you, Frida." Any response she might have had was drowned out by the roar of the engine and the screeching of tires as Julie emerged from her hiding spot. Frida noticed her approach and tried to run down the driveway as Julie sped down it. She almost got away. The car barely stopped before Julie flung open the door, knocking Frida over. Frida got back on her feet but was knocked down again by a blow filled with incredible rage. This time, Frida didn't rush to get up. Under normal circumstances, staying down was a good move when faced with an enraged tigress who had suddenly realized she'd been made a fool of. Julie began kicking her. Julie's rage was unbearable. Finally, when Julie grew tired, though still frothing at the mouth, I took the risk of pushing her to the ground. At that very moment, a police car drove by. Both Julie and I were handcuffed and an ambulance was called for Frida. First, the police questioned Julie. From my cell, I could hear her screaming. Eventually, they gave up and took her to cool off in a cell opposite mine. When it was my turn, I told them the whole story. I tried to convince them that Julie's actions were justified. I felt I owed her that. They released me with an apology at 11 p.m. I went to work on Monday. On my way home, I contacted Sarah by phone. She invited me to dinner again and passed on Hannah's request. Could that sweet Dave read me a bedtime story tonight? I arrived home an hour later than usual. I had been working with Frida's father and stopped by his house to talk to him and his wife. I told them everything I knew about their daughter's manipulation with my wife. Neither of them seemed particularly surprised. I urged them to try to convince Frida not to press charges against Julie for assault. They promised to do everything they could. When I finally got home, Julie's car was in the garage. Entering the master bedroom, I saw her empty suitcases on the bed. The shower was running that I called Sarah and canceled our dinner. We discussed what tactics Julie would take. Looking back, we both made a mistake. Julie came down the stairs, full of her usual confidence. "What's for dinner, Dave?" I didn't answer, so she walked up to me and stood right in front of my chair. "I've decided to forgive you, Dave. We both acted a bit foolishly, I know, but let's leave it all behind. I'm back." When I regained the ability to speak, I couldn't help but blurt out, "Can you tell me exactly how I acted a bit foolishly, Julie, and what I did to make you forgive me?" "Well, for the pain you caused me with your ridiculous divorce, Dave." "That was really low of you. Luckily, I always knew you're bluffing." "Why do you think it was a bluff, Julie?" That's what Frida said. Whatever illusions Julie had been holding on to up until that point seemed to evaporate. She was so deeply under Frida's spell that a small part of her was still clinging to it. Until now, her face turned pale and she sank onto the coffee table with a dull thud as the new reality began to settle into her mind. The realization lasted 5 or 6 minutes, once and for all. "We're breaking up, aren't we? You weren't bluffing about the divorce, were you?" "I was so sure of this that I just signed it," she said, sadly shaking my head from side to side. "For the record, Julie, we're not breaking up. You pushed me away. I always did everything I could think of or had the energy for. What did I get? You just left, leaving me lost and lonely. I tried to warn you. Didn't I tell you it was a game of chance? How much more straightforward could I have been? After all the love and effort I put in, I knew I deserved at least respect and loyalty. Did I get that? No, I got punched in the teeth, disrespect, brokenness, and confusion. Have you ever looked at the balance of effort in our marriage and seen the one-sided result that I've seen over the last 5 weeks? No, you just let some manipulative jerk convince you that you could get more. Well, now Frida is not going to be yours. I've dealt with her. Where the hell did that come from? Listen, this has nothing to do with Frida. Of course, at some point I realized that this was just a scheme on her part to drive a wedge between us. But I never thought of her as anything other than an adulteress, which is exactly what she is. So we're fine, right, Dave? There it was, the crucial moment, the point of no return. No, we're not fine, Julie. We have signed divorce papers. I can't forget the disrespect you've shown me all this time. Not to mention the threats. I have to tell you, when you tossed me out, someone picked me up. Surprisingly, Julie's face went even paler. What do you mean, Dave? I met someone else, Julie. She started out as just a friend who helped me get through this. God knows I needed it. You left me, I'm really sorry, Julie, but in this game, you took the risk and lost. With a clear conscience, I walked into a new life. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English Epics. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.